The phone was ringing. I stared at the caller ID, my mother's name flashing on the screen after 7 years of silence. 7 years since my family disowned me over a lie. My hand trembled as emotions surged through me. My mother's voice cracked as she spoke, saying Stephanie had finally confessed to making false allegations against me. I glanced out the window at my wife Sarah playing with our daughter Emma in the backyard. A beautiful life my family knew nothing about. Before I tell you how my world was shattered by a single lie, and how I rebuilt it from scratch, drop a comment letting me know if you have ever had to start over. And if this story resonates with you, please hit that like and subscribe button to support stories of resilience and redemption. I grew up in a middle-class family in Washington state, where appearances and reputation meant everything. My parents, Frank and Martha, were traditional to their core, deeply involved in the local community and church. My brother Jake, 3 years younger than me, and I were raised to be model citizens. We had the typical brother relationship growing up, with our fair share of fights and reconciliations, but ultimately we were close. I was always the responsible one, the straight-A student who never caused trouble, while Jake was more free-spirited but equally loved. By the time I turned 21, I had made my parents proud. I was in my final year of engineering at a prestigious university, maintaining a perfect GPA while working part-time to help with expenses. The hard work had paid off when I received an offer from one of the top tech companies in the country, a dream position with a salary that would allow me to pay off my student loans within a couple of years. It was Thanksgiving break 7 years ago when I decided to drive home to share the good news with my family in person. I had not been home for almost 6 months due to summer internships and a heavy course load. My mother was ecstatic when I called to say I was coming, promising to cook all my favorite dishes for the holiday. When I arrived home, everything seemed just as I had left it. The familiar scent of apple cinnamon candles, family photos lining the hallway, and my childhood bedroom untouched, as if preserved in time. My parents greeted me with warm hugs, and for the first time in months, I felt the comfort of being home. That evening, Jake arrived with his new girlfriend, Stephanie. I had heard about her from my mother during our weekly calls, but this was our first meeting. Stephanie was attractive, with long auburn hair and a confident smile that bordered on smug. She worked at the same retail store as Jake while he finished community college. From the way Jake looked at her, it was clear he was completely infatuated. During dinner, I noticed something odd in the way Stephanie interacted with me. Her gaze lingered too long, and she found excuses to brush against me when passing dishes. At first, I dismissed it as friendliness, but as the evening progressed, her behavior became more obvious. When Jake left the room to help our father with something, Stephanie leaned in close and asked personal questions about my dating life in a tone that made me uncomfortable. I tried to maintain a polite distance while still being welcoming, not wanting to create tension during the holiday. Jake seemed oblivious to any inappropriate behavior, laughing and sharing stories about their relationship with genuine happiness that I had not seen in him for some time. On my last night before heading back to university, my parents organized a small family gathering. A few relatives and close family friends came over for dinner and drinks. I was excited to share my job news with everyone, and the congratulations flowed freely along with the wine. Stephanie had been drinking heavily throughout the evening. As the night wore on, her behavior toward me became increasingly inappropriate. While Jake was engaged in conversation with our uncle, Stephanie cornered me in the kitchen, standing far too close and placing her hand on my arm. Her words were slightly slurred as she complimented my appearance and career prospects, comparing me to Jake in ways that made me deeply uncomfortable. I gently removed her hand and made an excuse to join another conversation, trying to avoid embarrassing her or creating a scene. The incident left me with an uneasy feeling, but I convinced myself it was just the alcohol and that it would be forgotten by morning. I left for university the next day with warm goodbyes from my family, having no idea it would be the last normal interaction we would have for 7 years. 2 weeks after returning to campus, I received a furious phone call from my father that would change everything. His voice shook with anger as he accused me of things I could not comprehend at first. According to him, Stephanie had told Jake that I had made unwanted advances toward her during the holiday visit. She claimed I had cornered her in the kitchen, touched her inappropriately, and suggested we should meet behind Jake's back. The accusations were so absurd that my initial reaction was to laugh, thinking it must be some kind of misunderstanding. That laughter only enraged my father further, who took it as a sign of disrespect and guilt. I tried to explain what really happened, how Stephanie had been the one acting inappropriately, but my father was not listening. In his mind, the respectable son he thought he had raised would never be accused of such things unless they were true. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, phone pressed against my ear as my father's words cut deeper than any physical wound could. "The woman you disrespected is the love of your brother's life," he said. "Jake is devastated. Your mother cannot stop crying, and I do not know how I raised such a son." Panic and disbelief coursed through me as I realized they were actually believing these false accusations. I immediately packed a bag and drove the 6 hours home, determined to clear my name and fix this horrible misunderstanding face to face. The drive gave me time to process what was happening, and I convinced myself that once I was there in person, they would see the truth in my eyes and hear it in my voice. I could not have been more wrong. When I arrived at our family home, the atmosphere was ice cold. My mother sat on the couch, eyes red from crying, while my father stood like a sentinel by the fireplace. Jake paced the living room, his face contorted with anger and betrayal. When he saw me, he lunged forward, shouting accusations and names that cut me to my core. My brother, who I had protected and looked up to me his entire life, was now calling me a sick liar and worse. I tried to stay calm, to explain my side, to ask them why they would believe such outrageous claims without even questioning them. I pointed out inconsistencies in Stephanie's story, reminded them of my character and our history together as a family, but it was like shouting into a void. Their minds were already made up. The most painful moment came when I turned to my mother, the person who had always believed in me unconditionally, and saw nothing but disappointment and doubt in her eyes. When I reached out to her, she flinched away as if my touch might contaminate her. That single gesture broke something in me that I was not sure could ever be repaired. My father finally told me to leave. Not just the house, but their lives. Jake said he never wanted to see me again, and my mother could not even look at me as I was escorted to the door. I remember standing in the driveway, staring at the home where I had grown up, feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. The damage did not stop at my immediate family. Within days, the story had spread through our small community. People who had known me my entire life, who had watched me grow up now, looked at me with suspicion or avoided me altogether. Family friends stopped returning my calls. Relatives took sides, most aligning with my parents and Jake. The final blow came when the tech company that had offered me the job called to rescind their offer. Someone had contacted them about the allegations, expressing concern about my character and potential liability. They apologetically explained that they could not take the risk, wishing me well in my future endeavors, while effectively ending my career before it even started. I fell into a deep depression. My grades suffered, and I had to delay my graduation by a semester. I stopped eating regularly, lost weight, and spent most nights staring at the ceiling, replaying the events over and over, trying to understand how my life had shattered so completely because of a lie. The hardest part was not knowing why Stephanie had done this. Had I unknowingly offended her somehow? Was she jealous of my relationship with Jake? Or was it simply the cruel whim of someone who did not care about the destruction she caused? I would not learn the answers to these questions for 7 long years. During my darkest period, I finally reached out for professional help. My academic advisor noticed my declining performance and recommended the University Counseling Center. There I met Dr. Winters, a therapist who would become instrumental in my healing journey. In our first session, I sat across from her, emotionally numb and physically exhausted. I told her my story in a monotone voice, expecting the same judgment I had received from everyone else. Instead, she listened without interruption, nodding occasionally and taking notes. When I finished, she looked me straight in the eyes and said something that would stay with me forever. "Cobb, I believe you. And even if no one else does right now, you need to keep believing in yourself." Those simple words were the first ray of light in months of darkness. Dr. Winters helped me understand that while I could not control what others believed, I could control how I responded to this injustice. We worked through my grief, anger, and betrayal, slowly rebuilding my sense of self-worth and purpose. After several therapy sessions, I made the difficult decision to start over completely. I applied to finish my degree remotely and began researching cities far from Washington where I could build a new life. Chicago became my target, a bustling metropolis where I could be anonymous, where no one knew my name or the false allegations that had destroyed my previous life. The first 6 months in Chicago were the hardest of my life. I arrived in the middle of winter, the bitter wind off Lake Michigan, matching the coldness I felt inside. My studio apartment in Rogers Park was barely larger than my dorm room with temperamental heating and noisy neighbors, but it was mine, and it was far away from the whispers and accusations that had followed me in Washington. I worked 3 jobs to make ends meet while finishing my degree online. Mornings as a barista at a local coffee shop, evenings, stocking shelves at a grocery store, and weekends doing computer repairs for a small IT company. Between shifts, I completed assignments and studied for exams, often going days with minimal sleep. But the physical exhaustion was almost a relief compared to the emotional turmoil I had been through. When I finally received my engineering degree in the mail, there was no graduation ceremony, no proud family taking photos, no celebration dinner. I sat alone on my futon, holding the diploma that had once represented such promise, and now felt hollow. Still, I allowed myself a moment of pride. Despite everything, I had finished what I started. With my degree in hand, I began applying for entry-level positions in the tech industry. The job market was competitive, and without the prestigious offer I had lost, I had to start at the bottom. After dozens of applications and interviews, I was hired by a small startup developing software for educational institutions. The salary was modest, but it was a foot in the door and an opportunity to rebuild my professional reputation. My new colleagues knew nothing about my past, and I preferred to keep it that way. I threw myself into the work, taking on additional projects and learning new skills to make myself indispensable. Gradually, the long hours and dedication paid off. Within 2 years, I was promoted to lead developer, and the constant worry about financial stability began to ease. Despite professional progress, my personal life remained empty. I avoided close friendships, fearing that new connections might somehow discover the allegations from my past. Dating seemed impossible as it would require vulnerability and trust that I was not ready to risk. The walls I had built to protect myself also kept out any chance of meaningful relationships. That changed unexpectedly when my doctor recommended yoga for the chronic back pain caused by long hours at my computer. Reluctantly, I joined a beginner's class at a small studio near my apartment, feeling awkward and out of place among the mostly female attendees. The instructor, Sarah, was patient and non-judgmental, helping me adjust my form without drawing attention to my stiffness. After several weeks of classes, Sarah approached me to suggest some additional stretches for my particular issues. Our conversation moved from yoga to books we were reading, and then to favorite coffee shops in the neighborhood. There was an ease to talking with her that I had not experienced in years, a lightness that made me forget my guardedness for brief moments. Sarah was different from anyone I had met in Chicago. A third-grade teacher with a passion for urban gardening, she had a calm confidence and genuine warmth that drew people to her. She asked questions about my life, but never pushed when I gave vague answers. There was no agenda to her kindness, no hidden motivations I needed to analyze. Our first date was simple, a walk through Lincoln Park followed by lunch at a local diner. I was nervous not just with typical first date jitters, but with the knowledge that any real relationship would eventually require honesty about my past. For that afternoon, though, I allowed myself to simply enjoy her company, to laugh at her stories about her students, and share safe parts of myself. As weeks turned into months, Sarah became a steady presence in my life. We developed routines, favorite restaurants, inside jokes. I found myself looking forward to weekends in a way I never had before, planning outings and experiences we could share. For the first time since leaving Washington, I was thinking beyond mere survival. The moment of truth came 6 months into our relationship. We were making dinner at my apartment when Sarah found an old family photo I had kept hidden in a drawer, the only connection to my past I had allowed myself. She asked innocent questions about my family, and something in her genuine interest broke through my defenses. That night, sitting across from her at my small kitchen table, I told Sarah everything. The allegations, my family's reaction, the lost job opportunity, my escape to Chicago. I spoke without stopping, afraid that if I paused, I would lose my courage. When I finally finished, I braced myself for what seemed inevitable, her disbelief, or worse, her pity. Sarah reached across the table and took my hands in hers. "I do not need to have been there to know you are telling the truth," she said. "The man I have come to know could never do what they accused you of." I do not know why this happened to you, but I know who you are now, and that is what matters to me. I had not cried since the day my family turned me away. But in that moment, with Sarah's hands holding mine, the tears came uncontrollably. She moved to my side of the table and held me as years of pent-up grief and relief poured out. When I finally composed myself, something had shifted. The secret that had weighed me down for so long was no longer mine alone to carry. Our relationship deepened after that night. Sarah became not just my partner, but my confidant, the person who knew every part of me and accepted it all. When she introduced me to her family, I was terrified, but they welcomed me without reservation, including me in holiday gatherings and family traditions that I had missed so desperately. A year and a half after we started dating, I proposed to Sarah on the shore of Lake Michigan at sunrise. The wedding was small, just Sarah's family, and the few close friends I had cautiously allowed into my life. As I spoke my vows, promising to cherish and protect her, I felt a sense of belonging that I thought had been permanently taken from me. 2 years into our marriage, Emma was born. The first time I held my daughter, her tiny hand wrapping around my finger, I made a silent promise that she would always know she was believed and loved unconditionally. I would create for her the safe, trusting family environment that had been ripped away from me. My career continued to advance. The startup grew, and I was promoted to technical director, leading a team of developers and helping shape the company's future. We purchased our first home in a quiet suburb, a modest 3-bedroom with a yard for Emma to play in and space for Sarah's garden. Piece by piece, we built a life filled with small joys and everyday happiness. One day, during a business trip to Indianapolis, I encountered an old friend from my hometown. Dave had been peripheral to my family's social circle, not close enough to have known all the details of what happened, but familiar enough to recognize me. We made awkward small talk, carefully avoiding any mention of my family or the past. Just as we were about to part ways, Dave hesitated, then mentioned that he had heard Jake and Stephanie were engaged. The news hit me like a physical blow. While I had built a new life, the people who had destroyed my old one were planning a future together, presumably still believing the lie that had torn us apart. That night in my hotel room, I experienced the most intense emotional breakdown since leaving Washington. All the pain and injustice came rushing back, magnified by the knowledge that not only had there been no consequences for Stephanie's lie, but she was now being welcomed permanently into the family that had rejected me. I called Sarah, my voice breaking as I tried to explain the tidal wave of emotions threatening to drown me. Later that night, unable to sleep, I found myself standing by the window, staring at the city lights and contemplating calling my parents. My finger hovered over their number in my phone, still memorized, though unused for years. In that moment of weakness, I nearly pressed call, desperate for some resolution or acknowledgement of what had been done to me. Instead, I opened my photos and looked at pictures of Emma sleeping in her crib, Sarah teaching her to walk the three of us at the lake. These images centered me, reminding me of what was real and important now. The family that had abandoned me no longer defined my worth or happiness. I had built something precious and genuine from the ashes of that betrayal. The next morning, I made a decision. I deleted my parents' number from my phone and resolved to focus entirely on the future. The past could not be changed, but I would not allow it to poison the life I had worked so hard to create. This conscious choice to move forward marked a turning point in my healing, though I did not realize at the time that the past was not quite finished with me yet. The call came on a Sunday afternoon in early spring. Emma was 4 years old, playing in the backyard, while Sarah planted her vegetable garden. I was on the deck watching my family and enjoying the simple perfection of the moment when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number from my hometown area code. Something made me answer instead of letting it go to voicemail as I usually did with unknown callers. The voice on the other end was immediately recognizable despite the years that had passed. My mother, older and shakier than I remembered, spoke my name as a question, as if uncertain I would acknowledge it. "Cobb, is that you? I have been trying to find you for weeks." I sat down heavily on the deck chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. 7 years of silence, and now she was calling as if it had been days. I said nothing, waiting, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure she could hear it through the phone. "Something terrible has happened," she continued, her voice breaking. "Stephanie and Jake broke up 6 months ago. There was a big fight, and she confessed, Cobb. She admitted that she lied about you. She made everything up because you rejected her advances and she wanted to hurt you. We have been trying to find you ever since we learned the truth. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The vindication I had craved for years was suddenly there, but instead of triumph, I felt a complex mix of emotions I could not immediately identify. Anger, relief, bitterness, and underneath it all, a profound sadness for the years that could never be reclaimed. "Did you hear me?" My mother asked, her voice pleading. Stephanie confessed. "We know the truth now. We were wrong, so terribly wrong. Please say something." "What do you want me to say?" I finally responded, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "That I forgive you for believing a virtual stranger over your own son. That 7 years of silence can be erased with a phone call. What exactly are you hoping for here?" My mother began to cry, deep wrenching sobs that once would have moved me to immediate forgiveness. Now they washed over me without penetrating the protective layers I had built around my heart. "We want to see you," she said when she could speak again. "Your father, Jake, all of us. We want to apologize in person. We want a chance to make things right. Please, Cobb. We are your family." I looked across the yard at Sarah, who had noticed my rigid posture and was watching me with concern. Next to her, Emma was carefully placing seeds in the small holes her mother had dug, her face serious with concentration. This was my family now. "I need time to think about this," I told my mother. "I cannot just pick up where we left off. My life is different now. I am different." Of course, she agreed quickly, eagerly. "Take all the time you need. Just please do not disappear again. We just want a chance, Cobb. That is all we are asking for." After hanging up, I sat motionless for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Sarah approached cautiously, sitting beside me and taking my hand. When I told her about the call, she listened without interrupting, her fingers tightening around mine when my voice faltered. "What do you want to do?" she asked when I had finished. It was the right question, focusing not on what my family wanted or what might be expected, but on what would be best for my healing. I realized I did not have an immediate answer. Over the next few weeks, I discussed the situation extensively with Sarah and with Dr. Winters, whom I contacted again specifically for guidance with this unexpected development. The therapist reminded me that forgiveness was not the same as reconciliation, that I could release my anger without allowing people back into my life who had caused me harm. Sarah, ever my steadfast supporter, assured me she would respect whatever decision I made, but gently suggested that closure might be valuable, even if just to formally end this chapter of my life. She also raised important questions about Emma, whether I wanted her to know her grandparents and uncle, and what kind of relationship that might look like if I decided to allow some level of contact. After much reflection, I agreed to meet with my family, but on my terms. I chose a coffee shop in Milwaukee, halfway between Chicago and my hometown, a neutral location where I could leave if things became too difficult. I went alone, deciding that introducing Sarah and Emma would be a separate decision to make later, if at all. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday morning. I arrived early, selecting a table near the exit and ordering a coffee that I had no intention of drinking. When they walked in, the first shock was their appearance. My father's once dark hair was completely gray, his confident posture diminished by a slight stoop. My mother seemed to have shrunk, her face lined with what I recognized as years of worry and regret. Jake, now 32, looked gaunt and tired, with none of the easy confidence I remembered. They hesitated when they saw me, as if suddenly uncertain of their welcome. I did not stand to greet them or offer any physical contact. They sat across from me, the table between us, like a physical manifestation of the emotional distance. My father spoke first, his voice rough with emotion. "Son, there are no words that can adequately express how sorry we are. We failed you in the worst possible way. We chose to believe a lie over the truth we should have seen in your character and in our hearts." My mother could not speak through her tears, reaching across the table toward my hand, but stopping short of touching me when she saw my slight recoil. Jake stared at the table shoulders, hunched with shame. "Why did she do it?" I asked. The question that had haunted me for 7 years. Why would Stephanie lie about something so destructive? Jake finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "She was insecure and manipulative in ways I was too blind to see. When you rejected her advances, it wounded her ego. She could not stand that you found her unattractive, or that you were the responsible brother while I was still figuring things out. The lie gave her power over all of us, and she used it. I nodded the explanation, confirming what I had suspected but never known for certain. The silence stretched between us until my father broke it again. "We have no right to ask for forgiveness," he said, "but we are asking for a chance to know you again, to be part of your life in whatever way you might allow." It was the moment for my prepared speech, the careful boundaries I had planned to establish. Instead, I found myself telling them about my life, about the struggles of starting over in Chicago, about meeting Sarah and the birth of Emma. I showed them pictures of my wife and daughter, watched them cry again at the realization of all they had missed. I did not offer forgiveness that day, nor did I invite them immediately into my life. Instead, I proposed a slow, careful rebuilding of trust. Phone calls first, perhaps video chats, where they could see Emma from a distance. Any in-person meetings would be brief and supervised. There would be family therapy if this progressed, non-negotiable. They accepted these terms with grateful humility that both satisfied and saddened me. As we prepared to leave, Jake asked the question they had all been avoiding. "Will you ever be able to truly forgive us, Cobb?" I considered my answer carefully. "Forgiveness is not something I can promise on a timeline," I told them. "But I am open to the possibility of building something new. Not what we had before that is gone, but perhaps something honest and real, if we are all willing to do the work." As I drove back to Chicago, I felt lighter somehow. Not because I had forgiven them, I was not there yet, but because I had taken control of the narrative. The decision to allow them back into my life was mine on my terms, and that agency was healing in itself. Over the following months, we established a cautious communication pattern. Weekly phone calls with my parents, less frequent ones with Jake. I shared limited updates about my life and listened to their attempts to rebuild a connection. Sarah joined some of these calls, her natural warmth easing the awkwardness, but never pressuring me toward more than I was ready for. 6 months after our coffee shop meeting, I agreed to a short visit. My parents and Jake came to Chicago for an afternoon meeting Sarah and Emma in a public park. Watching my mother kneel to introduce herself to her granddaughter, careful to respect the child's shyness and not overstepping, I saw genuine effort to honor my boundaries. The healing was not linear. There were setbacks, moments when old anger surged, unexpectedly conversations that ended abruptly when painful topics arose. We began family therapy with a specialist in estrangement and reconciliation, creating a safe space to address the deep wounds on all sides. 2 years into this careful reunion, I can say that while our relationship will never be what it once was, we have created something new that has value. My parents now visit quarterly, building a relationship with Emma that is unique and separate from the grandparents they failed to be for her first years. Jake and I will likely never regain the brotherhood of our youth, but we have found a tentative friendship based on who we are now rather than who we were. The greatest lesson I have learned through this journey is that forgiveness is not about erasing the past or pretending the hurt never happened. It is not even primarily for the benefit of those who harmed you. True forgiveness is an act of self-liberation, releasing the anger and bitterness that bind you to the injury. It does not require forgetting or removing consequences. It simply means choosing not to let the pain define your future. I built a beautiful life from the ruins of betrayal, finding strength I never knew I possessed, and love I never thought I would experience. The false allegations that once seemed to destroy everything became the catalyst for a journey that led me to Sarah, to Emma, to a career and home filled with purpose and joy. Not because of the injustice, but despite it, through my own choices to keep moving forward. If you have experienced betrayal or false accusations, know that your story is not defined by what was done to you, but by how you choose to respond. The rebuilding is hard, often lonely work, but the life you create can be more authentic and meaningful than what was lost. You do not need anyone's permission to start over, to set boundaries, or to protect your peace. Have you ever had to rebuild after betrayal? How did you handle reconciliation when the truth finally came out? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story helped you feel less alone in your journey, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the most beautiful rebuilding comes after the most complete devastation.